Hey guys, Caleb here from CDBS Studios, and welcome back to the series where I rank all 21 of the Ninjago seasons in increasingly dumber ways with increasingly stupider criteria to avoid actually saying what I think about the actual seasons themselves. And today we are continuing the long-running theme we've been doing this year where we've been ranking the Ninjago seasons based on how they use each of the main ninja. We've already done videos for Jay, Kai, and Cole, which you can check out on my channel already, but today we are finally finishing the original four characters of Ninjago by talking about Zane. Now, Zane in the Ninjago series is definitely a character that varies in his use, as he's a lot more similar to Jay than Kai and Cole, where he is the kind of character where he's present for every season. He does some things every season, but it's very clear that there are some seasons where he's more important than others, and it means that there's a very lopsided sake of the ranking today, unfortunately. But Zane definitely has a use in every season, being, of course, the ninja's Ninjaroid and primary use for exposition and knowledge, which does play into his character a lot of the seasons, but he does obviously get some pretty prominent plot lines here and there, which leads to him having some good things. So that's what we're talking about today. The 21 Ninjago seasons based on how they use the character Zane. And like I've done before, this video is about how each season uses the character Zane. It's not a look at, oh, this season gave Zane 20 more minutes of screen time than this season, so it has to be higher. I'm instead looking at how each season uses the character. Does he get a prominent plot line? Does his plot line make sense? Is he there because he has something to add to the season? Or is he just there because he's one of the main ninja? That is what we're looking at. Also, I figured out I'd call out once again, much like I did for the Cole video, I am writing and recording this video at the time when, technically speaking, Dragon's Rising Season 4 has released its first half, because yeah, we are currently sitting in the hiatus between the first half of Season 4 of Dragon's Rising and the second half of the season, and I genuinely felt kind of unfair to rank Season 4 of Dragon's Rising since we only have half of the season, and there's a very big chance the season could change once we get that second half, so it really didn't feel fair to count it for this video, so I'm not including Season 4, just thought I'd let that be known other than that. But other than that, we are including all 21 of the other Ninjago seasons, from the worst to the best, in terms of how they use Zane, aka the White or Titanium Ninja, the Master of Ice. For those of you that have seen the other videos in this series, I want you to take a wild guess what is last place. The worst season in terms of using Zane is, say it with me everybody, The Island. I swear, The Island has come in last place so often on his videos that genuinely, I'm probably putting more attention on this season than it ever deserves to actually have. You know what? For the sake of this, once again, there is nothing to mention when it comes to how Zane is used this season. Then I'm just going to start a brand new trend that I am now going to introduce a new ranking criteria called Sleeping Dad. A piece of media that is so bad that it puts me to sleep every time I watch it, or puts my actual dad to sleep, and he's actually pretty good about staying awake for movies. So congratulations, The Island. You have now received one sleeping dad. What a major accomplishment. And I'm rambling about this right now because it's actually more interesting than talking about how Zane is used in this season, because let me tell you, he's not. So let's just move on, because genuinely I do not feel like talking about The Island anymore today. Master of the Mountain Season 13 is really one of the seasons where Zane is very clearly present, not because he's important to the plot, but because he's one of the main ninja, as of course we see in the earlier episodes that he gets invited to the birthday party at Shintaro with the rest of the ninja. He goes to Shintaro with the rest of the ninja, helping them get there by fighting off these weird bat-looking things. And then when they finally get there, they end up going into the Shintaro dungeons, they get captured, and then the ninja gets separated, and Zane goes off with Kai to the Minos, and it basically does not go pretty much anywhere, because Kai gets most of the focus here as he becomes the Chancellor, and Zane kind of just sits back and gives Kai advice and really doesn't do much. The only real notable thing that Zane gets to do this season is the epic joke where they try to do the famous Gandalf "You shall not pass," and Zane hilariously fucks it up. So that's hilarious. But other than that, yeah, Zane really doesn't get used in Master of the Mountain, and therefore I can't really justify putting it any higher. So yep, here's where Master of the Mountain goes. Congratulations. Seabound isn't much better in its use of Zane. I mean, it is obviously a little better because it's not last place, but it does obviously still contain the problems that of mostly worst seasons in terms of using Zane. The season starts off pretty nice as we do get to see some fun relationship between Zane and Nia, as with Nia's powers constantly on the fritz. Zane is usually the one trying to contain them since he actually has the power to freeze Nia's water. So, of course, he is the one kind of containing some of her water outbursts, which is kind of a fun thing to see for the early episodes. And then later, when the ninja actually get the idea to take Nia underwater and go kind of try to figure out why her powers are on the fritz. They go on the underwater mission, and Zane kind of gets to take lead alongside Pixel, and they get to kind of lead this underwater mission, which is pretty cool. And it kind of just leads to the classic Zane gets to pretend to be a submarine captain for a little bit and get in the way of both Lloyd, Jay, and Nia. So that's kind of funny in a couple cases. I like the joke that they kind of try to justify the fact that Zane, and when they go underwater, wears the underwater ninja suit that they do this season, and they keep asking why he's doing it, and he just says he wants to match the ninjas, which I think is kind of cute and a kind of funny way to justify the way that, of course, for Lego to make a ninja suit, an underwater ninja suit for all the ninjas, they had to justify why Zane needed one. So I think that's kind of funny. But other than that, there's not much individually to talk about when it comes to Zane. He kind of just is part of other stuff. And even on the underwater mission, he doesn't get like much to do to shine outside of just being there and being the sea captain. So he's fine. He's okay, but he really isn't anything special this season. And I don't think it deserves to rank any higher, if I'm being honest. Next up, we've got Day of the Departed, which we've talked about multiple times in this video. Basically, in this series, I mean, if your name is not Cole, then you basically have nothing to do in Day of the Departed, because the only real thing that Zane gets to do is he gets to do the exposition about what Day of the Departed even is at the beginning of the special, and then when all of the former villains of the ninja get released, Zane gets to fight General Cryptor from season 3, which once again, I'll give this special this. At least they gave Zane a villain who he actually has business fighting. So that was kind of nice. And seeing the fun way that they kind of related it back to the premise, as both Cryptor and Zane are kind of products of Dr. Julian. So it was kind of nice to see them connect it back to him that way. But other than that, Zane is kind of just there. He doesn't really do anything prominent, which, let's be honest, none of the ninjas really do besides Cole. So pretty much it doesn't rank high. He's fine in this season, but genuinely it's a case of that there's really nothing to talk about, and therefore it can't rank any higher. So sorry. Next up, we've got Hunted, and this is definitely one of those seasons where there isn't a lot to truly talk about when it comes to Zane once again, as the main thing that happens this season is Zane is part of the original Core 4 ninja that end up going to the First Realm and spend time there with the Onian dragons and the Dragon Hunters, and they have some interesting things early on about him being the one who comes up with the idea for them to build the fake dragon that they're going to use to escape the dragon camp. So he helps build schematics and help builds it with the rest of the ninja. And after that, though, once they escape the dragon camp, he really falls off in terms of relevance, where it seems that the only thing that really wanted to do with him this season was cheap gags about him being smarter and better, with him being instantly able to be good with the chains that they use to capture the dragons and later the Colossus. The fact that he keeps making jokes about knowing things and keeps expositioning about Ninjago to Faith. So it just is cheap jokes about Zane being smart and better, which, especially by season 9 of this show, you already know. But it's fine. It really doesn't annoy me, but it's also just a case that if you're going to use a character strictly as comedy, then what are you doing? Because Jay already fills that role, so why are you stealing his thunder? It's fine for the most part, but it's definitely a case of a season where it doesn't really have anything individually to analyze in terms of Zane's use, so it doesn't really get to rank higher. Although I do really like his ninja suit this season of being kind of a metal-y version of his season 8 suit. So that's kind of cool, but other than that, it really doesn't rank any higher. Dragons Rising overall has been really bad at using Zane, I'm gonna admit. Like, he is very bad in Dragons Rising, and easily the worst of this entire season is, of course, season 1. And this season basically starts off with the classic case of we see him in the first episode when he's helping the ninja to contain the original merge, which is just a cameo. And then Zane is part of the ninja that shows up very late into the season as he wakes up from this random pod, which we've never gotten an explanation for why he ended up in a pod. So I don't know why this is a plot point, but Zane wakes up, and then after he wakes up, he has this little episode where he teams up with Kai and Nia to do some things. And then after that, he gets obsessed with these portal gates, which are these new things that have appeared in the merge lands, which basically connect these identical versions of the monastery of Spinjitzu across the merge lands and lets you teleport between them. And Zane becomes obsessed with them and trying to figure out what they mean. So he basically sits out of most of the season to learn about the portal gates. And then he randomly then shows up later to help with the final battle against the people, against the Beatrix and all that, and help Zane and help Lloyd release the Source Dragon and all that. But once again, it's really nothing special. I do like him though a little bit, as of course he does have some great rapport with the ninja when they do reunite, and it's pretty fun to see him have a plot point that actually involves his character where he finally has something he doesn't know anything about. So he actually wants to learn about it, and it kind of is nice to actually have his character do something like that. But genuinely, I kind of wish he was in more episodes, which is the sentiment I have for a bunch of the original Ninja and Dragons Rising. But I also, at the end of the day, understand that he's supposed to be. Dragons Rising is kind of supposed to be a bridging point between the original Ninjago series and the new Ninjago series they want to tell with the new Ninja. So having Zane be here to kind of parallel Sora makes sense because Sora is kind of supposed to be Zane's replacement. So it's fine. Zane's cool, but I guess if I also want Sora to be Zane's replacement, I wish the two of them spent more time together. But it's fine, but it's not going any higher. Dragons Rising season 3 is only a marginally bit better than season 1 is, if I'm being honest, because Zane basically serves the exact same role again as he is continuing to investigate the monastery portal gates, and it is not as interesting, especially 3 seasons in. It's like, how has he not figured out about these things yet? And it kind of leads to him eventually just accidentally stumbling on the rest of the ninja and joining the adventure to keep hold of the blades and keep them away from the Forbidden Five and all that. And then halfway through the first half of the season, Zane reunites with Pixel, and I genuinely kind of forgot that how much I loved their dynamic together, because once Pixel shows back up, Zane actually has a premise to be around in the story again, and I really loved him seeing him reconnect with Pixel, and it really made for some actually good moments in the season, especially when Zane gets that new big form, which is pretty cool. And then after the first fight, then Zane appears during at the end of the first half of the season to have the first battle against Thunderfang. And then after that, he doesn't do anything, because when we get to the first episode of the second half of the season, Zane just goes, "Sorry, Uwu, Pixel and I want to spend time together, so we're gonna off to some random location. We'll see you in season 4." It's like, what? Why? What the hell? Why? What is the point of that plot line? Like, huh? So yeah, like, again, a reason why I didn't want to include Dragon's Rise in season 4 in this video, because while Zane was kind of prominent for the first half of the season, we could easily have another case like season 3 here where he just off in the middle of the season and we don't see him again. So I didn't want to count season 4 for that reason. So yep, Zane was fine this season. He's okay. I like his more with Pixel, but the fact that he literally disappears entirely after the first half of the season kind of means you don't really get to rank higher, which, again, I don't want this series to be a look at screen time versus use of a character, but again, you give a character more screen time, you can do more with him. So literally disappearing halfway through a season means that it was like, what the hell were they doing here? And then finally, the best of the Dragon's Rising seasons for Zane was definitely season 2, as of course we start off the season very lightly as we have Zane hanging out with the rest of the ninja, doing their whole thing, and then once again he is getting obsessed with the portal gates, trying to figure out what they are. And then after the Forbidden Five, and more specifically Roz enacts his plan to try and release the Forbidden Five, Cole ends up coming to Zane for help, and Zane ends up actually pairing up with Cole, and together they try and protect Bonzel for this first half of the season, which was definitely pretty nice. I do love, of course, a good Zane Cole team up, and their dynamic together is pretty enjoyable, and overall it was very fun. And then, of course, they lose Bonzel, and Roz releases one of the Forbidden Five, which then leads into the Tournament of Sources half of the season, where we get to see Zane participate in the tournament, and he gets to have an elemental master fight, which was pretty cool, seeing as he completely missed out on the Tournament of Elements in season 4. But of course, he loses in the very first fight, and he gets his power stolen. And then, while they're in the city of temples, Zane discovers another goddamn portal gate and then gets obsessed with studying it. Why the hell is he obsessed with portal gates in this show? I mentioned I liked it in season 1, but what the hell? Why is this in every goddamn season of this show? What the hell? It's fine. It's definitely the best use of Zane in Dragon's Rising because, well, he actually gets to be present for the entire season and do stuff. But other than that, like, I generally can't put this higher than the other. I can only put this marginally higher than the other Dragon's Rising season because, again, Zane's plotline is basically the exact same in all 3 of these seasons. It just is how much use does he get across the seasons, and this is the season he's most in, so it gets to rank the highest. I mean, can we all just accept that this is just a deeply dumb premise for a video, and I'm just trying to make sense out of it, and to the best of my ability? This is one of the hardest I've actually had to do with any of the Ninjago character rankings, if I'm being honest. And finally, the last of these seasons where Zane is pretty much useless and only there because he's one of the main ninja is season 10, aka March of the Oni. And on the surface, this is once again the exact same problem where Zane is only present because he's a ninja, where we get to see some scenes where he fights with the ninja, he fights in the final battle, and we get to see some interesting moments here and there. He has some remore with Pixel, which is obviously great. They have him once again use his face disguise here so that he has the Ninjago movie look, which I'm guessing only exists because of the fact that they were doing the Ninjago Legacy sets at the time, so they needed an excuse in show for Zane to look like his old self so that they could justify the toys. But at its core, this is kind of not a great use for Zane as he doesn't get much to do this season. But, and here's the significant but, there is a really, really good couple scenes in the end of episode 3 of this season and in episode 4. The, of course, second to last and last episode of the season because it was only a 4-season show. But the plotline of this season at the end of this is that we have a bit where Cole falls off the bounty and the ninja assume him dead. And after Cole falls off the bounty, Garmadon tries to give this whole speech to the ninja about how they need to let go of their emotions and they need to work together or else the Oni will destroy everything, and Garmadon is trying to get them to look away from Cole. But the ninja are, of course, sad about the loss of their friend, and of all the ninja, Garmadon turns to Zane, expecting Zane to back him up full-heartedly because he's a robot and he sees reason. But Zane has this really great moment where he stands up to Garmadon and tells him off for trying to push away Cole from their minds. And this one scene is genuinely the reason why this season has ranked as high as it has, because it is such a great showcase of how, yes, Zane might be a robot, but he is capable of emotions on a level similar to a human. And when all things come down to it, even though the logical solution is to move on, Zane can't. And this just shows such a great use of the Zane character actually diving into who he is deep down and why he even is a ninja. And standing up to Garmadon is such a great moment, especially for the final season, the original final season of the show. It makes it so much more enjoyable. However, though, one scene can only carry you so high, so it gets to rank above the what I'm calling the useless Zane seasons. But let's just be happy that from here on out, we're actually cranking up the positivity and going forward. Zane at least gets a prominent plot line for every other season. So now it's time to talk about the actual season Zane is used in, and not the seasons where he gets like one or two things and I just a method of personal preference, basically. Oh boy, Crystallized. What are we gonna do with you? Crystallized is definitely one of the hardest seasons to rank every time I do one of these videos because genuinely it's one of those seasons where nobody gets to stand out individually because literally everybody shares a plot line with each other. I guess except Lloyd, but that's like the weird exception to the rule because yeah, Zane basically shares his plotline with every other character as we see in the early parts of the season, they do a bit where Zane turns off his emotions to basically because of the loss of Nia, he doesn't want to feel them, but he is able to convince Cole to reunite the ninja team. And then when Nia randomly shows up, Zane is the one who has to hold her in place by freezing her, which is a very fun use for the character. And then the ninja gets sent to prison, and we get the epic joke where Zane finally turns his emotion back on and literally just crashes out in the middle of the prison, which is kind of hilarious. And then when we transfer into the back half of the season, it just is the exact same case of once the Crystal Council starts attacking, Zane shares his plot line with Pixel, and it's just a plot line about trying to get the ninja back together for the final battle. He gets to unlock Dragon Form at the end, but once again, like Zane doesn't get anything individually because literally everything is shared with the other ninja. So I really didn't feel like it should rank higher because like why should it? It's fine for the most part. Crystallize Zane and Crystallize does not piss me off as much as some of the other ninja, but it definitely is nothing special, and so it kind of deserves to rank in the middle of the list, which is where it is right now. The pilots are definitely one of those seasons where they're very mediocre in the use of Zane. Like, if I'm gonna be honest, Zane is probably the ninja that gets the least to do across the pilots because he, once again, is missing from the entire first part of the pilots, only showing up as part of Kai's final test. And then he gets his white ninja robe and goes on the adventure with the rest of the ninja to try and and get the golden weapons, which he is part of the he's part of the opening. He then is one of the ninja they speed run through when they get the shurikens of ice, and then after that, he really doesn't get much individually. It kind of feels like personally he was the ninja they had the least figured out backstory for when they wrote the pilots because there is very little here that sets up the idea he's a robot. Just the fact that he kind of has a sixth sense and he is just a little weird, which is not the best, and it kind of just feels like they needed something for him, so that's what the personality they gave him before later defining him as the robot Nindroid, which is definitely a most egregious case here in the pilots. He's definitely the member of the original core four that got the least to do in the pilot, so it doesn't really deserve to rank higher, but at the same time, at least he's present for the entire season with something to do, so he at least gets to rank this high, but yeah, the pilots don't go any higher for the use of Zane. Sorry. Sons of Garmadon is definitely one of those seasons that's actually pretty decent in its use of Zane, as it has a lot of things I do really like about the use. First off, the one thing I'll call out pretty early on is that they have this idea set up where they do this whole thing this season where they try to fill in the backstory of some of the ninja, where they do a thing of how they were connected to Wu and how Wu found them. And I really like that they do a flashback this season where they kind of go out of their way to explain how Zane got the powers of ice, which has always been a question the fandom had until this scene. So it was kind of nice to finally get an answer for how Zane got an elemental power when he's not a descendant of an elemental master, which I do really like that, and the idea of him meeting Wu before he lost his memories is kind of interesting. Then the other kind of huge plot line Zane gets to be a part of is they decided to give Zane this power this season, which he barely uses later on, where he has the ability to basically use this cloaking technology, which literally only exists in the earlier scenes, to switch from his titanium form to this look from the Lego Ninjago movie, which genuinely only exists because season 8 had this stupid agenda where they tried to literally change the show in order to they literally tried to change the show in order to bring in the Ninjago movie fans that were just getting into Ninjago through the movie. So they needed to make some excuse up for how Zane could still be the Titanium Ninja, but also look like the Ninjago movie ninja, which I think is stupid. But they use this power in a fun way where he then eventually uses the cloaking technology to disguise himself as a member of the Sons of Garmadon and like infiltrate their operations for an episode where he actually gets to be part of the crew, get to learn some things about how they operate and what they're looking for, which is a very fun way. I like that the name he just chooses is Snake Jaguar, which is so stupid, but it somehow fools everybody, which is kind of hilarious. And then after that, he gets this plot line where he gets to kind of have a relationship with one of the main villains of the season, that being Mr. E, who we learn is also an android, but we never get any more backstory on anything about Mystery. And then they do this thing where Zane becomes unconscious and then just basically sits out for them for a little bit. And then they have the fun arc where they finally reveal that Pixel is the new Samurai X, and it kind of explains why she hasn't been in Zane's head since early season 7. So it's kind of nice to see their reunion. And then Zane gets banished to the first realm. So yeah, Zane's use is definitely spread out amongst Sons of Garmadon, but the stuff he does get to do is interesting and definitely worth talking about. So I really didn't think it deserved to rank lower, but it's definitely a case that definitely when we get to the back half of the season after he does the whole unconscious arc thing, Zane really doesn't get much to do. And even in the early parts of the season before we get the whole Snake Jaguar thing, there really isn't much going for him there either. So Zane's pretty fine in Sons of Garmadon, nothing that really offends me, but he definitely needed some more things for the early season and the late season for it to really go higher. Hands of Time is definitely another one of those weird seasons in terms of using Zane, as early on in the season we get to see Zane just part of the ninja team, he's doing his whole thing, and then later in the season, the ninja go off to try and rescue Cyrus Borg, who is being kidnapped, and Zane ends up getting attacked by the Time Twins, who attacked by a Chronix, who speeds himself up and causes Zane to go unconscious, which basically means that Zane is unconscious for a couple episodes, and then eventually when he is rebooted finally, he's rebooted in this weird way where he's like kind of glitching out, so he keeps making random facts. He keeps stating random facts. He keeps glitching out, speaking backwards, doing all this random stuff. And then they kind of try to do a fun story where he loses Pixel, which really doesn't matter in the long run at all because, like, they don't really address it at all early in this season. And then she just is completely back for Sons of Garmadon before it gets revealed that she is the new Samurai X, which I think is kind of a why would you do that? But I definitely think they had the plan early on that Pixel would be the new Samurai X, because when the new Samurai X does show up in this season, Zane gets to have a nice dynamic with them, which definitely makes me think that that they definitely planned that in advance. And then also all three of them, then the two of them team up with Cyrus Borg, and you really get to see a fun relationship with Cyrus Borg, which I've always loved Zane has. But other than that, there's really not much to talk about with Hands of Time. Zane is fine, but it definitely is being unconscious for most of the season and then glitching out and then finally getting to do stuff, which is basically just makes him more of an object this season than an actual character. So I didn't really think it deserved to last though, because at least he's present. But it also isn't anything interesting that deserved going any higher than like middle of the list energy, if I'm being honest. Skybound is one of those seasons that definitely is very mild on its use of Zane, but the stuff he does get to do is actually really interesting, as I like that early in the season, he kind of is being the guiding light mentor kind of figure, which I do really like when they do this with Zane, since they're going to do the whole thing about him being a robot being smart, so they might as well make him a kind of mentor when Wu isn't around. So I kind of like they do that for this season, and he gives advice to Jay, being one of the few people that knows about Jay's crush on Nia, which I kind of like, and it leads to them having a fun dynamic. And then after the ninja gets sent to prison, I do kind of like they tried to artificially make this rivalry between him and the mechanic, where the whole premise is that the mechanic was working for Master Chen, and then he's mad about the fact the ninja took out Master Chen so that the mechanic lost all of his business, and then he wants Zane's parts, which is just a one episode rivalry that then they expanded on in the later seasons. So that's fun. And then we get Z's. And then after that, Zane has kind of falls off in relevance after we get out of the prison and we start getting the ninja get captured by Nauticon. But what I do really like they did for Zane getting captured was I like that they kind of used his wits as his mortal enemy, where Zane is so confident that he can out manipulate Nauticon and actually use his wishes to get around Nauticon's manipulation is so clever, and then only to see Nauticon still find ways to twist Zane's words and turn his wishes against him is such a really fun dynamic. And I really like that they kind of went to show that Nauticon is just as smart, is just as smart, even smarter than Zane takes him for, which does actually give Nauticon some actual threats and stakes. And then Zane kind of then disappears from the season after that because he gets captured by the Jin Blade before eventually finally returning for the final battle. And although it technically doesn't count for the sake of this video, I also thought I'd mention that we get kind of replacement Zane in this season in the form of Echo Zane. But the funny thing is that they kind of just completely forgot they did this after the season because we never saw Echo Zane again. I mean, I saw a theory once that he is Mr. E from season 8, but there's no proof of that, and they never set that up, or I don't even know if that was a plan. So, I mean, overall, season 6 is kind of fine, but it kind of suffers from the traditional season 6 problem for most of the ninja that aren't named Jay or Nia, where basically the ninja are there, present, and then they get captured by Nauticon and then completely disappear from the season. So, it's fine, but I do like what Zane does before his capture enough to where it deserves to rank middle of the list. So, that's kind of my feelings on Skybound for Zane. It's fine, but definitely nothing more special, I'll say. Season 5 is definitely one of those cases, again, where we get some interesting stuff to do with Zane, but also not a ton of stuff that's very prominent. One of the things I do really like about Zane in season 5 is that now that he's rejoined the ninja team, he gets to have a lot of fun moments with them, readjusting to their new ways of life. And then after Lloyd gets possessed and taken away from the ninja, Zane once again goes into the traditional smarty head that gets to help the ninja through their various problems. And then they do the thing where when they're doing the arc where the ninja are trying to find a leader to fill the void of Lloyd being gone, which I mentioned in a previous video, it should just be Cole, but whatever. Where Zane gets his chance to be leader in the episode Sticks and Stones, but then he gets his voice modulator messed up or something. So they just decide, yeah, bro, you can't be the leader anymore. So Jay's going to do it. So yeah, that was a great choice for them, I bet. And then this kind of just leads into a couple episode arc where Zane's voice gets messed up, where first off, he's talking backwards. And then when they go to the temple, the Sensei Yang's haunted temple, and they're trying to stay away from all the scary stuff, and Zane's voice box is stuck in shouting mode. So of course he's very loud for the entire thing when they're trying to be scared anyway. And then when they go up the snowy mountain to try to get the sword, Zane is talking like a pirate, which is probably foreshadowing for season 6, if I'm being honest. And then he gets his voice back finally in the Cloud Kingdom, and then he's back to normal. But then what I do really like is that they use his smarty pants brain very well, as once they actually make it to the tomb of the first Manjutsu master, Zane is the one who's using his technological prowess to actually solve some of the riddles they need to get through. So that's really fun. But other than that, Zane kind of doesn't get a whole lot of very prominent stuff to do in season 5, but the stuff he does do makes sense for his character and is overall pretty interesting for most of the time. And actually, one of the few times where they use a character for cheap gags in the form of Zane's voice box being broken, actually being funny. So therefore, it also does more for me than the cheap gag from season 9. But yep, Zane's use in Possession is very good. I liked it, but it's another case of the stuff that's here is good. It just isn't something that stands out and deserves to go any higher. Next up is Legacy of the Green Ninja, and this is definitely one of those seasons where it takes a while to get to the actually good stuff because the filler arc at the beginning of the season when the ninja are training Lloyd, there isn't really nothing to note almost at all. Like Zane is there, he's present, he gets to have some fun moments with the ninja. I do like that when they do the episode when the ninja get turned back into kids, Zane is kind of freaking out because ninjroids aren't supposed to be able to become kids, which I kind of find hilarious in its own right. And then we finally get to the Dark Island half of the season, which this is when Zane really picks up in relevance because we get to have him be a pretty big exposition vehicle as we see he uses his falcon to scout out the island initially, and it kind of leads to them getting attacked. Zane is the one who gets to exposit about multiple different things like the Temple of Light and the Golden Weapons, which is pretty interesting, and that makes up. But the thing that really stands out to me about Zane is, of course, on the route to the Dark Island, we end up crash landing on a lighthouse where we reunite with Dr. Julian. The Zane's built creator, who we thought was long dead, finally comes back, and Zane gets a chance to reunite with him. And it is honestly so sweet seeing Zane and his father reunite and learning things about each other that they didn't know, which is so nice. And then even getting to see Dr. Julian tag along for the rest of the season on the Dark Island is nice and fun, which I always have loved. And then we get to the final battle where Zane gets to be present and he's one of the ones who gets corrupted. So it's fine. Zane's pretty good in Legacy of the Green Ninja. It's just one of those cases where it takes a long time to get to the actually good stuff to where I didn't feel like it really deserved to rank high, but it's fun. I love his use in Legacy of the Green Ninja. I just think, again, if his use was more spread out, it could have ranked probably even higher. Alrighty, now we're getting into the real good stuff now, and we start this off with Prime Empire Season 12. And Prime Empire is definitely a really great season where they finally have a use of Zane because this season deals with a cursed video game that is stealing people and being code and all of that. The ninja actually have a reason to use Zane because he is, of course, the robot of the group. They do, of course, unfortunately, have to make up this stupid excuse to where Zane and Pixel cannot go into the Prime Empire video game because something about the fact that their code would get all messed up if they did. So they have to stay outside. So while the rest of the ninja are inside the video game, which is taking up most of the season, Zane and Pixel stay on the outside and try to hunt down Milton Dyer, the creator of the game. And we get to see that there are some awesome moments. Of course, we get the awesome episode where Zane cosplays as Spider-Man Noir and gets to try to track down Milton Dyer, which I think is probably one of my favorite episodes of the whole series. Like, it's actually a really good episode, and I laugh out loud, especially after having watched Spider Noir, so that was fun. And I also really like that they finally made the mechanic and Zane have a full rivalry because while they tried to artificially make a rivalry in Skybound, they actually finally got to use the mechanic Zane rivalry well this season as the mechanic serves as kind of the secondary villain and he needs Zane as a power source for the portal they're building for Unagami, which is fun. And then Zane gets to interact with Molten Dyer and kind of push him to apologize to Unagami, which is fun. And overall, Zane is definitely not in enough of Prime Empire due to just the fact that he doesn't get to go inside the video game with the rest of the ninja. But the stuff he does instead is actually pretty useful and actually a good use of the character. So I think it deserves to rank high, but at the same time, it isn't anything amazing. And once again, I wish his use was spread out over the course of the season, which means it gets so it can rank above the rest of the seasons. But it's still good, and I think number 5 is nothing to scoff at, especially in this ranking. Next up, we have Secrets of Forbidden Spinjitzu, and this is once again one of those seasons where it takes a long time to get to the good stuff, but once we do, it is actually some of my favorite stuff that Zane has ever gotten to do in the entire series. First off, we have the early pieces of season 11 during the fire chapter where Zane gets this vision of Aspira and her fire warriors destroying Ninjago, and he gets to use his powers there, which his vision powers kind of haven't been useful in a long time. So it's kind of nice to see that brought back. So that was kind of nice. But other than that, he doesn't really do a ton in the fire chapter apart from helping the ninja in the early parts with like the mission where he has to dive inside a creature to get back their parts for their car. And then later, when they need to find the second scroll of Forbidden Spinjitzu, Zane is part of the crew that goes to the Explorers Club, where we get the fun moment where he looks in the mirror and sees himself just as Code with no body, which is kind of funny. And then we get to the good stuff where at the end of the first half of the season, he gets exploded by a Sphera and sent to the Never Realm. And this is when we finally get to the good stuff, because we have the entire story of the Ice chapter where we're fighting this vicious Ice Emperor, the guy that straight up took over this realm and turned it into a frozen wasteland that he basically kills people for fun, basically. And we spend the whole season building up how he's this irredeemable monster. And then we get to the end of the season and we've learned the real backstory, that it is actually Zane being manipulated by the true twist villain, and the fact that he literally was manipulated into thinking he is the ruler of this realm and he'll do anything to keep that the case. And then I love that they used that to actually tell this really great story about Zane, that even though he's evil, he deep down still has the heart of a ninja. And Lloyd is able to get through to Zane and allow him to come back, which is definitely one of my favorite arcs they've done for Zane's character. And I really do love the twist that it's honestly so obvious throughout the season that it is just Zane as the Ice Emperor, but you are never led to believe it because, well, why would you? So I really love this use of Zane. It's definitely really fun, and I do love it. It just is a case that, once again, if he got more to do in the fire chapter half of the season, then I could have maybe been persuaded to put this a little higher. But other than that, he's just a great use in Secret of Forbidden Spinjitzu, and it just is so fun. And also probably one of the best times we ever had one of the arcs of ninja turns evil, if I'm being honest. Tournament of Elements is one of those seasons that is really, really good in its use of Zane. Where basically, I mean, Zane is literally the entire reason and motivation for the main ninja going to the island and participating in the Tournament of Elements in the first place. So that's pretty big, of course. And then once we get to the island, Zane actually gets multiple plot lines to be part of. The first and pretty major one is we get this really good story about Pixel, where we have this story where Pixel is trying to help Zane remember his humanity and trying to help him break out of Chen's dungeon. And then he finally does, only to learn that they scrapped Pixel for spare parts. And Zane decides to upload her into his brain to use her as a helper, which is definitely a really fun way to keep Pixel around in the story for a while, and a great way to further her arc as she is trying to convince Zane to keep his humanity, even though Pixel is long past hers. And then we also get this fun side arc where we get to learn about Zane's fear, as diving into his ideas of being scared of something, which is kind of scary, which is kind of funny, and the fact that we get to see how he's terrified of this dragon he keeps dreaming about, only to learn later on that the fear was inside of him and he is the one who is able to first unlock an elemental dragon, which is pretty cool. And then the other plot line, which is probably my favorite thing he gets to do, is be a side character in Cole's plot line, as after Cole finds Zane and the two of them decide to break out of Chen's underground facility. We then get the fun thing where Cole decides to go back and help the other elemental masters, and Zane decides he's going with him. And then the two of them work together to incite Cole's rebellion, which is pretty fun. And then Zane gets to be a part of the Serpentine of Chen's Anacondri Wars when we do return to the mainland. So Zane is definitely part of multiple plot lines in Tournament of Elements, which I think is one of the reasons why I had to put it so high. But the thing is, all the plot lines make very good sense for Zane's character, and it leads to him having a very good season in Tournament of Elements. But it's just a case that I think I wish if the plot lines were maybe more Zane focused, this could have been a little higher, because he definitely is the side character or just the POV character for three plot lines he's involved in. So I wouldn't say that they're amazing. But other than that, Zane is really good in Tournament of Elements. It just never was going to top the two best seasons in terms of using Zane. So number 3 is what Turn of Elements gets, but I'd say it's not a bad showing for this character. Taking home silver medal as second place for the use of Zane is gonna go to Rise of the Snakes. And this is definitely one of those seasons where they had a very good. I think they were making up for the fact that they didn't really use Zane a lot in the pilots and didn't really have his character locked down yet. And they finally figured it out here in the season 1, and so took full advantage of what they had here, as Zane gets multiple storylines this season that fully focus on him. One of the first episodes we get early on in the season is the episode Home, where Zane gets to form his original bond with the Falcon, which has become one of his main things he has in most of the later seasons. And it's the early sense of him being a robot. But I love that they use the Falcon to lead Zane to the Falcon leads Zane to the Lloyd's treehouse, and then while they're out defending the treehouse, they eventually find that the Serpentine burnt down the monastery, and the ninja are fully blaming Zane, and they're all against him, and then Zane leaves, and they think it's because they were mean to him, only for Zane to re-show up saying that he followed the Falcon once again and discovered the Destiny's Bounty. And it leads to a really emotional scene where Wu tells Zane that there's more to him than meets the eye, and I find it to be such an enjoyable episode. It's probably, again, one of my favorite episodes in the whole show. And then we get the fun side episode where Zane has the vision of the Green Ninja prophecy, and so gets to be the lead character there. And then, of course, we get probably everyone's main episode when they think of season 1 Zane, that being TikTok, the episode where Zane finally reveals that he is a robot, and we get the emotional backstory of what happened to his creator, which is finally the moment Zane unlocks his true potential. And genuinely, it's my favorite true potential arc in the whole show. I mean, they came out swinging with the first one. Other than that, Zane does get some other pretty fun stuff. I love the episode where, because of Lloyd, Zane's suit turns pink, which is kind of hilarious, and I do really love it. And I do like that they use Zane's robot abilities to kind of combat the Serpentine well, with his camouflage, his ability to use different eyes when he gets hit with Venomari. It's definitely a very good use for Zane over the course of Rise of the Snakes. And even though there's really only 2 episodes that hardcore focus on Zane, there are generally some awesome episodes, and I could not deny Rise of the Snakes a spot this high on the list. But it just never was gonna be the number 1 clear best winner for the season's use of Zane. Sorry to be kind of predictable, which I know I try not to do in these videos, but when you're dealing with a character like Zane, who, much like Jay, is a side character for most of the seasons, the season that is very clearly putting Zane as the focus is easily gonna be the best season in terms of it. So, season 3 is the season where technology takes full focus, as we see the entire premise of the season is after the events of season 2's final battle, Ninjago City has evolved to using technology, and Zane is kind of almost the forefather inspiration for it, as him being such a unique Nindroid allows for Borg and all the other technology people to be very impressed with him. I mean, he's literally inspiration for not only the new Nindroids that they fight throughout the season, but so many technological advancements Borg makes. We get to see this awesome relationship with Pixel, as you get to see a robot who follows program bond with a robot who has emotion, and Pixel gets to learn what emotion is, especially when Zane splits his heart with her, which is so interesting. I love that they use Zane as a fun way to kind of showcase how the ninja can react out of their element, as we get to see both Zane advance in the Digiverse when he is the one who's able to unlock the golden power first. And then, of course, we get to go to space where Zane gets to showcase his powers there as well. And obviously, the space scene is pretty great as well. And then we return to Earth, where we get the emotional final sacrifice where Zane is the one who sacrifices himself for the sake of the rest of the ninja. And genuinely my favorite scene in the entirety of Ninjago. It's just such a great scene. They knew exactly what they had here, and they did not hold back on this sacrifice. Genuinely, season 3 is pretty easy to see as the best season for Zane, as it's easily the season where he is the focus, and therefore he gets the most to do, and everything he does get to do is easily the plotline where he is the main character and the ninja are side characters in his story. So easily season 3 has to take the cake as number 1 in this ranking, and it is easily the best season in terms of using the character of Zane. So there you guys have it. My ranking for all 21 of the Ninjago seasons based on how they use the character of Zane. This was a very fun video to make, of course, and now we have completely finished the original 4 ninja, so stay tuned because I am planning videos to eventually do this project again with Nia and Lloyd, the last 2 ninja I have yet to cover. Probably going to end up doing Nia next, if I'm being honest, because I think Lloyd is a good one to end on, but other than that, Zane was a fun character to do, and I want to know if you want to take on the challenge of ranking all 21 Ninjago seasons based on how they use the character of Zane. Leave your rankings in the comments down below, and if that's a little too difficult, just tell me what some of your favorites are and what maybe some of your least favorites are. Without further ado, thank you guys all very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys!